Thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here, and I'm really thrilled to have a female host in this event. It's very rare. I'm going to cover a number of things. I work in corporate governance in academia, and I coach and mentor executives. And what is quite important is that when I was giving talks on tech 12 years ago and 14 years ago, I was just saying, look, guys, if you dislike smartphones, if you dislike the internet, just go switch off your devices and have dinner with your family. But now I can't really say this because AI and data tech is so much embedded into everything we do professionally and sometimes even privately. So the data powering what we get as information on our devices, smartphones, how we check the schedules of our kids, how we go in moving around with transportation. This is all powered by data, and we can't just switch this engine off without really feeling the neglect of someone who is kind of left behind in the economy. I am starting telling you a story which happened a while ago in 2011. And I was witnessing this story as a board member of a company called Dun& Bradstreet. Dun & Bradstreet is the world's largest enterprise data company. On March 11 in 2011, there was a huge tragedy. It was a natural disaster, earthquake followed up by a huge wave in Japan. And in course of this event, 20,000 people vanished into the sea. Of course, there were massive damages to the infrastructure, to businesses. There were complex issues with the nuclear power plant, and the world started reacting. What is not quite known today is that on this day, Japan stopped reporting data. And you can kind of, imagine that Japan is quite an integrated economy, and a lot of connections in global supply chains run through Japan. For example, in 2011, we still had Nokia in Europe as a smartphone manufacturer, and Nokia could not understand whether they will receive sufficient supply from certain components for those smartphones. If you have stuff like this going on, then it might have severe consequences for the financial markets. And you might remember that 2008, we had a very severe financial crisis, which caused really earthquakes of despair financially and economically throughout the globe. So now we had a natural disaster, putting additional pressure on the distressed economies. So Dun & Bradstreet is an enterprise data company, and they are very big in credit risk for enterprises, in compliance and regulatory risks for enterprises. And they had the data set of Japan before the earthquake. So they decided to ask a very simple question: what type of businesses and what kind of businesses are still there, and what kind of businesses are in the sea, so they don't exist any longer. So that was a very interesting issue, and I quite admire the effort because it was done more or less manually. So what was happening there is that a team of 6 data scientists, and all of them had very different training initially. They sat down and they decided to combine sources of information available at this point for the global markets. There were some pieces of information from satellite companies which could provide geospatial data. And that was a very interesting learning. For example, if you see lights around the city and you see lights in some factories, you might assume, okay, so those factories are operational. But the team discovered that that was actually a false signal because there were just people camping in those factories because they lost their homes. But for example, the indication of cars in a parking slot of a factory, that was a very good indicator that the business was still going on. So we had a physicist in the data scientist team, and he could read radiation data. So he could kind of, process information and understand information in the crowdsourced data bank on radiation. Japanese were capable to report radiation level into a common crowdsourced data bank on their smartphones. That is what they were doing several times a day. But obviously, radiation is not just a continuum. It fluctuates depending on the humidity, whether there is wind or not wind. So, all those things which a normal person can't truly understand without some training and understanding how this radiation might fluctuate. So, Anthony, our data scientist, could do so. He was trained physicist, and he manually corrected pieces of data in this data bank to read proper radiation activity in Japan. So there were other things in implementation called remote computational interface and social listening. So the scientists were listening on conversations on Twitter and on other platforms which were more common to the Japan economy. And to make a very long story short, within 4 weeks, they rebuilt a Japanese database from scratch, and they provided this database for the whole world for free. That was a huge relief for the financial markets because people could understand, for example, what will happen with some supplies and when on earth are we going to be active again with our Japanese vendors. So what was very interesting as well is that this exercise, though provided for free for everyone, generated considerable intellectual property for Dun& Bradstreet. And this exercise actually rose awareness about what algorithms in data science could do in case of a natural disaster. So in my eyes, the conclusion is quite simple. If we look into Lee Kuan Yew, who was a founder of Singapore, he said famously that the secret to Singapore's success is in tolerance among different nations and in air conditioning. So if he lived today, he would have added and in data. I think this component of data is a very crucial component of competitiveness for the nations and for businesses. If we look into Europe and just forget all about data, forget all about AI, just look into the numbers, we see that Europe has a considerably lower GDP forecast comparing to China and the United States. We know that Europe has less amount of digital companies comparing to European and Chinese players. And of course, we have low share of unicorns, those companies which valuation achieved $1 billion US. We don't have a lot of leading young companies. A lot of companies in Europe are incumbent, which were born in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And overall, Europe spent less on R&D than United States and China. And this is something which worries me a lot, especially if I consider fundamental scientists. And I'm not just thinking about applied things, but the fundamental science and investment into fundamental R&D is something which will be the engine for growth and innovation some decades after this amount was spent. Because we should not be forgetting that Google is mathematics from the 30s. And AI, with all due respect to deep learning and ImageNet and all the above, but in a sense, AI is mathematics from the 40s and from the 50s. If we kind of, follow on this journey of competitiveness and we look on market capitalizations since February to 2020, then we see that they aren't European companies and European sectors on the map of Mega 25. So companies and industries which are sectors on their own with exceptional financial performance and growth. And we see that in this graph, a lot of emphasis is on the American tech. So companies, big tech like Apple, like Amazon, like now Meta, so Facebook, Google, they are growing, and new competitors are jumping on the ship. So the exceptional growth of Zoom was observed around the world during pandemics. Then we have Asia tech follow the lead of the US tech with fantastic companies like Alibaba, like Samsung. Then we have the sector of electric vehicles, and that's something really unseen that for the first time an electric vehicle company, Tesla, took 1 trillion US dollars in terms of valuation on the market and became one of the most valuable companies in the world. And Tesla is a very data centric business, it's a very AI centric business. Then, of course, semiconductors with all the issues of shortages we are perceiving right now during pandemics, and the Chinese consumer sector is, of course, booming. So no European players making a sector on its own. And we see that this gap in between of high performers in the economy and low performers is just widening dramatically. And that's once again is a serious warning for the Europeans what is going on. And in my eyes, everything we observe politically is just a consequence on what we are observing economically. So there's unfortunately more to come and more to be worried about. Along the same line, all this growth doesn't happen without data and without companies investing into data. And we saw even that before the pandemics, the growth of investment activities in AI and data accelerated along all kind of tools on how to invest, be it private investments or angel investing, be it public offering IPOs, be it mergers and acquisitions, or even minority stakes of angel investors in some businesses. So, no one said it better than Andrew Ng, one of the most celebrated scientists and investors in AI and in applied AI with knowledge of China and the United States. He famously said that AI is a new electricity. And of course, this is just being embedded into everything we do and everything we develop. Kevin Cayley, the famous founder of Wired, echoed Andrew Ng. He said that the business plan of the next 10,000 startups is quite clear. You take something like, for example, agriculture, and you add data and AI into it. So, but how can we make AI and data work for everyone? And I will provide you with some suggestions, which I think European policymakers should really consider and be worried about if they don't. So, first and foremost, we need to recognize that data is valuable, and data should be property of its creators. So it's kind of interesting that certain facts are perceived to be in, fait accompli, something very easy to understand, and something which has been around us for a very long time. But for example, value of work and intellectual work or artistry was not always on the table, even in Europe. And only in the epoch of Renaissance, people recognized that the value is not just in labor, but it's, for example, in creating a painting, in creating a piece of music. And this is when a very slow process began to get intellectual creations and artistry into legal frameworks. I believe we need solid legal frameworks around data. So GDPR is one way, but it has its shortcomings. So legal frameworks absolutely have to be adopted to reflect the value of data. Myself, in my wallet, I have this organ passport. In case I perish in an accident, I declared myself available for organ donation so that my heart or my lung or whatever can go to someone who is gravely ill but has still a chance. So those organ passports are very normal in the piece of Europe I am currently in, so Austria or Germany or even Switzerland. I'm asking myself whether we can't have a data ID like the organ passport that we can donate our data. Of course, we don't need to die to do so. We've just all witnessed the rise of coronavirus. And I think that if we could donate pieces of our health data to scientists for research and for those who are skilled in coding and application build up to experiment and build great apps, I think that the whole race of apps on COVID would have been quicker, and the products wouldn't have been this crumblesome. So I believe donating data is something which might be a very usual business for us to engage in the community and to get better results from those we elect into the office and from those we demand certain outcomes. Then I think that for me, digital sovereignty is a must. And we know that there was no issue when the internet was firstly designed in the thinking of the architecture that data will sit with some monopolies. But the story of internet was such that the so-called platform companies got on stage and they provided products and services, and we gave them consent to use our data. Sometimes they even did not ask for our consent. They just started using it, and this is how we transformed from consumers into users, or more or less donors without any compensation. I think that digital sovereignty can be only phrased as such if businesses have their own data markets. And I just don't see another way than to build those digital data markets on a distributed ledger. I will talk about this at the end of my presentation. But this is just for me the only way. I think that a decentralized data market in the hands of those who produce data is a must to liberate AI and to democratize AI. And it's enabled by what we currently have as data as a token concept. So here is a kind of a break. We need to be tremendously aware that the world of tech is no neutral any longer. Of course, technology per se is neutral, but it can be used for certain means. And we see that technology is powerful if it develops in certain ecosystems. What is going on right now is a cold war over hot technologies in between of United States and China. This is from one side about the race of a so-called new IP, which will change the way the internet is built, and which will put the control over the use of internet into the hands of a state. There is a Silk Belt Road initiative in China propagating the use of new IP, and more countries are joining in, including Russia, including some Arabic countries, including African countries and Latin American countries. This is something which I think is really worrisome because, in the eyes of Western Democrats and people who comply with these ideals of democracies, internet should be free. then everything what is going on in the semiconductor world is another issue. And we see the history behind Huawei in the United States, and how US technology companies are treated in China in terms of data, in terms of their involvement, and how they handle information in China. And then, of course, we have a race over AI, with China investing heavily into R&D in billions and billions of US dollars. We see that there are more PhDs coming out of Chinese universities with degrees in AI. And we see as well that even children in school, starting with the sixth grade, start learning about rudimentary machine learning practices. So obviously, this AlphaGo demonstration of AI winning against the world champion in Go was a Sputnik moment for Chinese. The country woke up. I did not perceive this moment to be that important for the public and for the publicity in Europe and in the United States. So AI scientists in China are as popular as some movie stars, and I think that this should be considered when we plan on where to invest and how to think about innovation and advertising something as important as AI in general public. So, coming back to the sovereignty concept and to decentralized data, I think that there is a good practice for businesses and for nonprofits to organize themselves into data trusts. And I can give you one example. Automotive industry in the United States and in Japan was quite worried about Tesla and about the rise of self-driving companies, which were quite usually incubated within technology giants like Google or the Alphabet Group. So they decided to create data trusts, data markets for self-driven miles. And obviously, if you are in AI, you know that in case of Waymo, they drive cars, of course, they collect true data on self-driven miles, but they complement those data with synthetic data. So automotive companies decided to put their data markets together to be capable to do R&D on a larger data set with really driven data. And that's quite important because, you can capture more weather conditions, you can capture more situations to really train those models and allow, for example, sensors to see better or perceive the environment in a better way. And this is an example how a data trust can work, or how a decentralized data market can work for the benefit of those who are organizing it. And of course, car design is a matter of Toyota versus, I don't know, General Motors. This is the whole thing. But this common layer of data might be shared for the benefit of everyone. So, another topic which is tremendously important for policy makers and for those interested in competitiveness, and this is data and digital literacy. Uh, if you sit on a corporate board around the globe, usually you have a very healthy understanding on the cash flow and on profit and loss situation and a balance sheet of your company. Even if you are, for example, a legal scholar, or if you are in HR, you will still be capable to interpret cash flow. But what I perceived quite often among my colleagues on corporate boards, if there is a mentioning of, for example, open source or deep learning, then people are scared. And this is because there's an absence of this digital literacy in corporate boardrooms. And it should not stay like this. So education, perpetual learning, self-education. So webinars like where we're sitting right now should be propagated beyond the community of data scientists and people who are busying themselves with AI because they love it and because this is their profession. I think that we need to be more open and go to the press and explain what AI is and what it isn't. I think we should abandon this concept in the society that AI is some sentient robot running away, which will might be tamed by probably a female scientist. So this is a domain of science fiction, but it's not the domain of our daily life. And the more senior managers and the more non-technologists understand basic concepts of technology, of digital, of data, the better they will make decisions in terms of M&As, investments, and development of their incumbent businesses. So back to the decentralization and democratization of data. In Europe, there is a wonderful initiative to build a protocol to power decentralized data markets. And I'm talking about the Ocean Protocol. So the Oceanal Protocol is a response of a community which was born actually by AI scientists who built the companies and exited them in 2006, 2017. So they had means to invest into something else, and they started working on blockchain, and many of them started working on Ocean around 2014. So data is a huge market. It's a huge industry. Alone in Europe, we are talking about 400 billion US dollars. But we need new tools to make data an asset class, to make it valuable for everyone touching in it, not just big tech. And so just the inspiration of how Bitcoin is built, and coin as a token can be transplanted into the data community. So data as a token concept might power how we think about new decentralized data markets and new decentralized data as a token economy. So Ocean is a wonderful case study in my eyes to open up the whole data economy. Uh, on one hand, of course, it's a community, it's an ecosystem of individuals. There are data trusts involved there, there are organizations involved there, and there's a mission there which is driven by an institution they call Ocean Protocol Foundation. Then, on another hand, Ocean is a technology, it's a set of tools as public infrastructure to facilitate the mission. It's open, so you can really use it and start building applications on top of it. And then, last but not least, Ocean is a token as well, with incentives to grow and sustain this newly born ecosystem. If you look into Ocean data tokens, you might ask who is a holder. And we have a bunch of very different niches there, coming from, for example, the insurance side. So data insurance, data as a collateral concepts are here. Then we have data exchanges. Then we have data DAOs and data corporations, data unions, and of course, everything which is around data custody and data wallets is integrated into the new ecosystem. Just a couple of examples. So someone put out on the Ocean a data set which was about consumer browsing data. And this data set could find its users because, on this Ocean data markets, there are a lot of scientists who are not necessarily, uh, they're not necessarily engaged with Googles of this world or Tencents of this world. They are on their own. They might even work from home, from Berlin or from Bochum or from London. So they require data to do their experiments and to build their applications, but they lack this data. So they go on the Ocean data market, and then they see something which might be interesting for them. So they connect, and then the exchange happens. So example of a data set which was put on this data market is this consumer browsing data. Then there are data hunters on this ocean market. So many companies truly require data. They require alternative sources for data. So they go there and they buy and pay in ocean tokens. For example, Data Reservoir is one of such data hunters. And frankly, right now, this is the largest decentralized data market in the world, powered by the Ocean Protocol and organized as an ecosystem. So, in my eyes, this is just an example how a sovereign data economy might look like. And of course, we need more of this. We require additional protocols. We require, additional funding into this and additional products and additional projects. But this is something which could be considered as a public utility, as a network substrate to power the nascent economy. And of course, we can have here all kind of business models to benefit from. We can have initial data offerings like IDOs. We can have even speculation, people speculating on those IDOs. We can have data on auto-priced modem by market mechanisms, and the protocol cast acting as an asset for those using it. So I think that the data economy is a microcosm of a broader crypto economy. I think we're just in the beginning, and whenever I'm asked about this, I compare this to the state of internet around maybe 98, 99. We might require geniuses comparing to Mark Andreessen, who created a Mosaic browser and who actually liberated a good UI for the internet so that people were not bothered by cumbersome UI, and the usability of internet exploded with the inventions around Mark Andreessen and his team. So we need more of this now. And I guess that in this case, we will see the balancing of power from the big technology leaders from the United States and from China going into smaller markets, niches, all kind of industries, and even municipalities and nonprofits. But once again, just one activity will not solve a problem, and we need a comprehensive dialogue with policymaker. We need more technology literacy with them and with incumbent businesses, and of course we need more of the events like our data science festival to propagate the ideas and to exchange information. So I can only suggest befriend me on Twitter or come to my LinkedIn site. I'm really responsive, and I would be very happy to get a question now and giving back to the audience.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating. I think I've probably got a question about almost every one of your suggestions for what we should do with data. But I would like to encourage everybody to pop any questions that you have in the Q&A. I can ask questions, but I'm sure you've also got some things that has made you think about or made you want to know more about. So please, any questions you've got in the Q&A. But saying that, I will kick off. I think one of the things I found really interesting was your discussion about data literacy and how we get that into the boardroom and how we get that into companies. And as somebody who was a geneticist for many years and witnessed during the pandemic the explosion of knowledge that people had about what was quite a niche subject, which was RNA viruses, and something that I knew lots about, but I was sort of reading the newspaper and it had PCR tests and reagents and all these things that I knew lots about, but the general public didn't. Have you got any suggestions about how we as data scientists can help bring data literacy into the population as a whole? So obviously there's a question of, the C-suite of a company understanding data, understanding the health of the data in their business. But I mean, I think generally it's a population-wide problem. So you said people believe AI is a robot that's going to solve all our problems, and I think they genuinely do. Have you got any suggestions for us as data scientists as to how we can bring that literacy?
Look, I just think that humans so we are very different from other mammals because humans are telling stories. And of course, for a data scientist looking on a couple of sheets with maths, it's already in its story on its own. But very few people understand this language, and we need a more of we need translators. I can't read a Japanese novel, so I would require translation into English or German or French. And it's the same for the general public. I think that we need to exercise a lot of discipline on how we talk about what we do on a daily basis, and just build stories around what we do. And they're fascinating stories because, I mean, some people are engaged in medical research and dealing with data, others are engaged in physics. Then, I mean, astronomy is currently unthinkable without data. So just translating those bits of research into a digestible language will bring a lot, and maybe even cooperating with very normal people who are editors in some, let's say, mainstream publications, talking to them so that they help to create stories around what we do on a daily basis. And then it will diminish this fear. So I just perceive that many people are afraid. And, children are great because they just ask questions and they are not ashamed. But, a white 60 years old male in a boardroom is sometimes ashamed to be perceived as somehow not knowing, and there's no shame not to know stuff. So just encouraging people to ask questions whenever they see it in the corporate ladder, in the corporate universe, and tell stories.
That's fascinating. I think it's, I think storytelling, particularly storytelling with data, is an art that as data scientists we're constantly trying to perfect. But I hadn't really thought about it from the perspective of like the whole population having to understand this to get to the point that you talk about, which is where we treat data as we treat any other commodity. There are no questions in the Q&A session yet, so I will keep asking questions. If anyone has one that they ask, then please do pop it in. I thought what was really interesting was listening to you talk as well about, how we understand and appreciate that data has a value, and we understand and appreciate that data also has an owner, but we're not yet at the point where there's a market in the way that other things that we own and trade, money, stocks, shares, etc. How far away do you think we are from understanding and treating data as that as a society? Do you think it's sort of a decade away, or another generation away, or even further out?
I guess it might be one generation away, because I think that even our kids, they just handle the whole world slightly differently, even how they interact with, the devices and how they learn. But I mean, unfortunately, especially in Europe, teachers are still from the older generation. So we need to get more people into schools who are, for example, in data science. And I mean, I donate some of my time giving talks in schools, just, because I think it's very important. But I have a kid, so I have a 12 years old. So I have an example at home. And this is what is my inspiration. So I kind of, give back because I just understand the demand. I think we just need to force ourselves, and everyone is busy, to say, is there any program, any local program where I can go and just spend some time talking to those students? And it's very rewarding emotionally. There are fantastic questions. So many people are interesting. So usually it's very, very rewarding. On another hand, I just think, look, I'm really worried in terms of medical research. China invests ton in medical AI for a very good reason. They just don't have enough humans to treat the population. So they have, for example, 20,000 people and just one eye doctor. So just by definition, they require to use technology to treat and to diagnose. So they invest tons. And of course, whenever they will build something scalable, it might come to us. And then we might have other biases in data sets. We might have, diverse problems. And maybe the industry will wake up and say, So somehow we should have been invested on our own in creating this health data markets around certain diseases, certain conditions, and of course, on a meta level, etc., etc., etc. But it can't just be that we are in a world where, for example, I learned it yesterday. I was completely, a hormone therapy and hormone replacement therapy for women, and each and every woman at some point in her life will move into the menopause, and apparently, all those therapies were developed on the cohort of male patients, where I'm just like, how is it even possible? But it is what it is. It's in our world. And I think that the more education about biases as such there is, the more there will be even a pressure from the society to do something about it. And of course, I think it's just unseen and unheard of that none among European politicians truly talk about data and data economy. So we have, thankfully, Andrew Yang in the United States, who started to approach the problem from the automation perspective, talking about unemployment, for example, due to self-driving trucks. So he emphasized this issue. But I mean, there are other professions which have nothing to do with self-driving trucks. There are other issues, and I think that it should be approached not from the perspective of fear and we just forbid everything, but from the perspective of a solutionism, like where to invest and how to think about solving those problems. But it's a very long process because data is not a piece of a cake. You can't kind of touch it really, but then it has a tremendous impact on your health, on your education, on your environment, and the quality of your life. So I guess we will see maybe one generation pass before we are really there, but we can just speed up the process with everything we are doing. Yeah.
Lovely, great, thank you. I actually had a follow-on question that's quite similar to one that's come up from Lawrence in the Q&A. So I was thinking about it in terms of when we think about how we value startups, and particularly in the instance where startups go wrong and we take the assets and we try and give them back to investors. We use a lot of proxies for the value of data, but we don't have a way to quantify the value of data itself. And Lawrence has said a very similar thing, that they've said in a lot of B2C applications, the value of data is in its usability for improving the product, which you find out via experimentation. So the user data is not a fixed set of values, but it's an interaction and it forms the basis of the products. How do you see this valuation of data working in a decentralized data market like Ocean?
So there is a built-in function evaluating a data asset, and obviously, there is a demand and there is a supply. So they are data hunters or companies or scientists or whoever uh, willing to access a certain piece of information which they lack, they can't assemble on their own. So, and then this asset comes in. So there's a bidding process which creates this valuation mechanism. The bigger the ecosystem, the more precise this valuation will be. And I guess there will be other domains to evaluate data, but there is a built-in mathematical function providing a price tag, which I consider to be very fascinating. And this is a very brilliant question, by the way, because on a number of occasions, it's being said zero revenues, but the data is so valuable. Yes, how valuable is valuable? So, and sometimes it's just, like a huge estimate, which is usually linked to the figure of the founder, but has nothing to do with the asset on its own. So not perfect, still a nation thing, but it is already there. I'm just encouraging you, go to the Ocean marketplace, check it out, and start experimenting with it. Initially it doesn't cost you anything, but it's really fascinating. And if you have a project, you can apply at the Ocean Foundation, um, which might vote among the participants. And if your project wins, then you will receive a grant to do it.
That's very exciting. Excellent. I'm definitely looking at Ocean this afternoon.
Yeah.
We have one more question in the Q&A. Apologies, Sanjay, I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but I think it's asking about the protection of data. So they've said these days children ask questions to their smart device rather than their parents, which I think maybe as a parent yourself, I mean, I definitely, some of my cousins learned to use the Alexa before I think they learned to read and write. And there's data floating around that communicated via these assistants. How should we be treating this data?
So look, frankly, I learned a while ago, like that capture was, when you are serving the web and then out of sudden you have to say it's a breach, it's not a breach, so this Google tool. And it has nothing to do with cybersecurity. So you're proving yourself that you are a human being and not a robot. So this is how it's phrased, but this is actually Google training AI. It has nothing to do with you proving that you are not a machine. So, which is a brilliant collection mechanism and training mechanism for data. It's absolutely brilliant. And what was interesting in Austria, I learned there was a legislation forbidding use of, for example, American tech in the Austrian mail offerings. So they had to build out all these capture mechanisms, which cost them millions and millions of euro, and it was really difficult. And of course, infrastructural system of the Austrian mail is not as elaborated as what we have at Tencent, right? So poor people, and that was just to prevent. They did not know that it was not even for humans. They did not know that it was just about training some foreign AI with our human eyes, right? So I'm kind of I don't have really like a feeling on what the children are asking. I think this is a valuable data set on its own. What I know for sure is that AI is sometimes a god savior for parents with autistic children. So there was a while ago an article in New York Times, I think it was like 2016 or 17, where a boy, autistic boy, was communicating with Siri, and the boy wanted to know everything about some flights, and he could really pinpoint that over our head now there is a machine XYZ from Frankfurt to San Diego. I mean, he knew it all, and all different varieties about the aircrafts and whatever. So the parents, they could not handle it, and the boy was talking to Siri. At some point in time he told Siri, Siri, I love you. And Siri responded, you somehow, well, yeah, you're a wind in my wings, something like that, which was kind of a sweet story. But frankly, I am not concerned about children talking to the machines and technology being used in certain circumstances. I think even that we will need to develop social robots and applications which will be there for kids. We had pandemics, for example, and it was just difficult. So having such technologies on scale would have been easier for families. I'm not that concerned. Of course, privacy is important. There should be a human in the loop to look in and to say, was there something which is worrisome? Some content which should not be put in front of a child. But then, where there's will, there means. So some kids they are much better hackers than the most elaborated cyber hackers. So where there is a will, there are means, they will get the information. But on another hand, we prevent them from learning more and being exposed to a bigger world. So maybe it's not a very satisfying answer. Every data market should be treated with care. There should always be human in a loop. This is my personal opinion. We should design things with privacy in mind. For example, that we can delete it quite easily without reverse engineering every single step and having headaches on how to do so. But on the other hand, data is empowering. It gives knowledge. And the sooner our kids are exposed to this knowledge and structured matter, the better. So that's my personal opinion.
That's really interesting. To follow on, probably could ideally be maybe even a yes/no question, but do you think that we will ever see something that looks like a global GDPR, as we say have the UN Declaration of Human Rights?
So the global, I don't truly think so. I think that GDPR is a shiny example on what to do with data. So if we look into Californian legislation, it's very similar to GDPR. Chinese regulation is very similar, but with very different pretext and context behind it. Even if on the surface it's all kind of to protect privacy, so it's interesting, but I don't think that we will come to just one uniformal regulation on how to treat digital, because we don't have common laws and regulations about everything else. And digital for me, it's just the continuation of anything else. So everything has a digital shadow, be it a human, be it a device. Now we have sensors, we can connect our cats and our dogs to the internet if we want, without asking them, frankly. So this just continuation of offline to online is ubiquitous, and economies are not regulated with just one set of regulations. And this is why I think it's very unlikely that we are going to have one global GDPR. Having said that, I really pray that we don't get several internets. And right now, this fragmentation is definitely, in a way, this is where we are heading to. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Um, we've got 4 minutes left, so I wanted to finish on a lighter question.
Yeah.
So I cannot wait for the day that we have autonomous vehicles and self-driving cars. I think that's going to significantly improve my life when I can, send my car off over to my parents' house to drop something off and have it come back.
Yeah.
Equally, from a work perspective, I am really, really, really excited about the advent of quantum computing and what that means, particularly work that I've done in the past in the optimization space. It will change how we think about optimization and how we think about algorithms that have large solution spaces. I wondered what other AI breakthroughs, they can be realistic, they can be in the next 6 months, they can be in the next 60 years, that you're looking forward to in both your personal life and in your work.
Thank you. I absolutely love this question, because there is something which I just want to have an AI assistant. So not in terms of scheduling our meeting in Starbucks when we maybe meet in London, but I work very interdisciplinary, so I need stuff from all kind of fields and domains, and I can't digest it all. So there are so many papers, even published on AI. So, for example, I was talking about this decentralized data market. I would love to ask AI, dear AI, please research all papers on small data sets, and the fusion between symbolistic AI and big data and machine learning, and tell me in the morning, and tell me where are the biggest questions. And then I wake up, and then I have 20 papers, but not 1,000 and not 1 million, and not like I spent my whole day trying to understand where to look. I would love to ask AI, please find me information about health/nutrition around hormones. And then, in the morning, I have this information available for me, just, preparation. Because the life is getting more and more complex. And of course, AI is just It's a destiny of AI to do exactly that, to connect the dots, to liberate our time, to screen through bunch of text and numbers and say, well, those are contradictory opinions in those 6 white papers. Okay, we read it, we understand it, we can deal with that. Uh, Without reading maybe other 1,000 or 2,000. So we just don't have time for that. So that's my hope for AI.
That's amazing. I think that's a very bold hope. It's essentially another brain to
Yeah,
do
no,
twice the
absolutely.
work that you can in normal amount of time.
Absolutely. I mean, just really research for me, please. Right? It's not about deriving conclusions. It's not about then connecting this to the history of Renaissance, but it's just basic research. And I think that all lawyers would be grateful because, you know, clerks, the initial stage when you enter a law firm, this is just research, right? So insurance claims, the history of claims, whatever physicists would kiss whoever will build such a tool, right? So just to have it, I
Yeah,
just think it will come. I think this is something what we will see. I am not someone who believes we will have unscale AGIs. I just don't believe it. We need so much computational power. We need so it's just the architecture, current architecture, is not. Making it easy to build, and we don't have reasoning machines, so it's still very primitive, you know.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
think Lecan says that AI is still as intelligent as a rat, right? Well, rats are of course very intelligent beings, right? It has nothing to do that an AI can pass a medical exam, you know, to
yeah,
like be a doctor, but then this AI will not be doing anything else like cooking a soup,
yeah.
right? So we just, but for something like research, please tell me, please advise me what to read. I would be so happy when I
I
see
think there may be some PhD students on the call trembling in your boots because I think you might have just described a replacement PhD student. Um,
fantastic.
anyway, thank you so much, Anastasia. Thank you for your time, and
Thank
thank you
you.
for everyone who's joined us today. Really, really fun session. I hope you all enjoyed it, and please do join any of the other Data Science Festival sessions that you see. They're all well worth your time, and you'll learn lots of them. So thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good rest of Monday, everyone. Thank you. Bye, everyone.